Good evening. If you would, please turn your Bibles to Zechariah chapter 12. Zechariah chapter 12, and we are actually going to be doing something very unusual for us. We're actually going to be looking at 3 chapters today, and I promise to do it in less than 3 hours. Zechariah 12 to 14 it's all one unit. It's all one thought. It's the coming day of the Lord, the salvation and judgment that He brings. And I think it's important to look at it as a unit. There are some things where if you look at it too close up, it loses really definition and meaning. I mean, imagine going to the Dakotas to look at Mount Rushmore. You don't stand, 3 inches away from the rock face to see the presidents carved into the stone. You need to stand back at a distance so that you can see the faces there. Imagine a soccer game if the camera operator was zoomed in so that the only thing you could see was a soccer ball. You had a super close-up view of the soccer ball, but you couldn't see any of the players kicking the ball around. You couldn't see where the ball's going. All you could see is the soccer ball. You wouldn't appreciate the soccer game. So we're zooming out a little bit here to cover these chapters. I think there's also there's a danger in over-analyzing these chapters. Zechariah 12 to 14 is very closely tied into the book of Revelation, to the book of Daniel, to the end times. And a lot of people like to try to pick these things apart and identify, this person with this modern person and, this event with this date. They're trying to fix the time for the return of the Lord, which Jesus has warned us not to do. So I hope we can avoid those errors. I hope we can benefit to the most from these chapters by taking them in total. So let's read Zechariah chapter 12. The burden of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord, who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. On that day, declares the Lord, I will strike every horse with panic, and its rider with madness. But for the sake of the house of Judah, I will keep my eyes open, when I strike every horse of the peoples with blindness. Then the clans of Judah shall say to themselves, the inhabitants of Jerusalem have strength through the Lord of hosts, their God. On that day I will make the clans of Judah like a blazing pot in the midst of wood, like a flaming torch among sheaves. And they shall devour to the right and to the left all the surrounding peoples, while Jerusalem shall again be inhabited in its place in Jerusalem. And the Lord will give salvation to the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem may not surpass that of Judah. On that day the Lord will protect the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the feeblest among them on that day shall be like David, and the house of David shall be like God, like the angel of the Lord going before them. And on that day I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and pleas for mercy, so that when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him, as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him, as one weeps over a firstborn. On that day the mourning in Jerusalem will be as great as the mourning at Hadad Rimmon in the plain of Megiddo. The land shall mourn, each family by itself, the family of the house of David by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the house of Nathan by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the house of Levi by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the Shimeites by itself, and their wives by themselves, and all the families that are left, each by itself, and their wives by themselves. On that day there shall be a fountain opened for the house of David, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to cleanse them from sin and uncleanness. And on that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, so that they should be remembered no more. And also I will remove from the land the prophets and the spirit of uncleanness. And if anyone again prophesies, his father and mother who bore him will say to him, You shall not live, for you speak lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and mother who bore him shall pierce him through when he prophesies. On that day, every prophet will be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies. He will not put on a hairy cloak in order to deceive, but he will say, I am no prophet, I am a worker of the soil, for a man sold me in my youth. And if one asks him, What are these wounds on your back? He will say, The wounds I received in the house of my friends. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who stands next to me, declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. I will turn my hand against the little ones. In the whole land, declares the Lord, 2/3 shall be cut off and perish, and 1/3 shall be left alive. And I will put this third into the fire, and refine them as one refines silver, and test them as gold is tested. They will call upon my name, and I will answer them. I will say, They are my people. And they will say, The Lord is my God. Behold, a day is coming for the Lord, when the spoil taken from you will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half of the city shall go out into exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations, as when he fights on a day of battle. On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mount shall move northward and the other half southward. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azal. And you shall flee as you fled from the earthquakes in the day of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. On that day there shall be no light, cold, or frost. And there shall be a unique day, which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. On that day living water shall flow out from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea, and half of them to the western sea. They shall continue in summer as in winter. And the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord will be one, and his name one. The whole land shall be turned into a plain, from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem shall remain aloft on its site, from the gate of Benjamin to the place of the former gate, to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the king's winepresses. And it shall be inhabited, for there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. Jerusalem shall dwell in security. And this should be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the peoples that wage war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. And on that day, a great panic from the Lord shall fall on them, so that each will seize the hand of another, and the hand of the one will be raised against the hand of the other. Even Judah will fight at Jerusalem. And the wealth of all the surrounding nations shall be collected, gold, silver, and garments in great abundance. And a plague like this plague shall fall on the horses, the mules, the camels, the donkeys, and whatever beasts may be in those camps. Then everyone who survives of all the nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths. And if any of the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, there will be no rain on them. And if the family of Egypt does not go up and present themselves, then on them there shall be no rain. There shall be the plague with which the Lord afflicts the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. This shall be the punishment to Egypt, and the punishment to all the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. And on that day there shall be inscribed on the bells of the horses, Holy to the Lord. And the pots in the house of the Lord shall be as the bowls before the altar. And every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holy to the Lord of hosts, so that all who sacrifice may come and take of them, and boil the meat of the sacrifice in them. And there shall no longer be a traitor in the house of the Lord of hosts on that day. So I know that's a significant number of verses, but it's all one theme. It's the coming day of the Lord. The phrase is repeated over and over again. On that day, on that day, on that day. And it's a future day. This is not a prophecy that has any immediate fulfillment. There's not a time period in the history of Jerusalem that fulfills these words. This is a prophecy of the end of Judgment Day. It's the declaration of the Lord, the one who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. He created the world, and in this day he is recreating the world. He's going to make a new heavens and a new earth. And he will complete the work he's already begun in making a new spirit within mankind. It will be completed at this day, but it's not going to be an easy process. It's not going to be painless. It's not going to be gentle. It's going to be a day of violence, pain, anguish. He says in verse 2, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. Verse 3, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves. All the nations of the earth will gather against it. In the end, the entire world is going to be united. Not in a universal bond of brotherhood, not in bonds of peace and love, but they'll be united in a hatred, not necessarily of literal, earthly Jerusalem, but certainly against the Lord and his chosen place and his chosen people. They will gather together seeking to destroy God and his people, but the object of their wrath, the people of God, the church, going to be a heavy stone and a cup of staggering, and seeking to destroy and abuse Jerusalem. They're going to find themselves drunk and wounded. In attempting to lift this rock, they're going to throw out their own backs. In their wrath and their determination to destroy the people of God, they themselves will be destroyed. Not because of any intrinsic superiority of Jerusalem or of God's people, but because of the superiority of the Lord. There's been a lot of political tension in this country. A lot of people on the left have been very, very angry, talking about armed resistance, and somebody just commented that, the conservatives are the ones who own the 300 million private guns in the country. If they want to fight, let's fight. That's not what's going on here. It's not that, God's people are just stronger or better armed or richer and able to conquer the entire world. It's that the Lord himself will fight for them. He will strike with panic the horses and with madness the riders of those who come against Jerusalem and the house of Judah. It will be so open and so obvious that the people around it will say, verse 5, The inhabitants of Jerusalem have strength through the Lord of hosts, their God. It's not through might, it's not through power, it's not through wisdom, it's by the Spirit of the Lord that the people of God will prevail. It's not through force of arms, it's not through politics or economics, it's by the power of the Lord. Verse 6, on that day I will make the clans of Judah like a blazing pot in the midst of wood, like a flaming torch among sheaves. They shall devour to the right and to the left all the surrounding peoples, while Jerusalem shall again be inhabited in its place in Jerusalem. If you remember in the book of Revelation, there's a prediction of all the nations of the world gathering against the army of the Lamb. Gog and Magog gathered together to fight against the Lamb. And what happens when they gather together? Fire comes out of the mouth of the Lord and devours them. The enemies of the Lord are going to be destroyed, seeking to destroy the Lord's people. Like a torch among dry stalks of corn, sheaves of wheat. They'll be consumed in moments. They have no hope at victory. While they seem to have every advantage, the fact is they are hopelessly outmatched by the power of the Lord. The Lord gives salvation to the tents of Judah, to those who seem to be on the very fringes of the Lord's people. Because there's no more glory given to the very center of God's people, Jerusalem and the house of David, than there is to those on the very outskirts. Every Christian alike is an heir of God and a co-heir with Christ. And you don't have any greater or lesser inheritance because of who you are, where you live, or what you have done. Your inheritance is secure in your position as a child of God. Our glory is the same because our glory is Christ. And on that day the Lord will protect the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the feeblest among them shall be like David. We remember David. We remember this mighty man of valor, this youth who slew lions and bears, struck down the giants, killed tens of thousands of enemies. A man after God's own heart. And the house of David should be like God, like the angel of the Lord going before them. That the power of God's people, the power of the Lord is unimaginable and unmatched. And on that day, the Lord will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And if the Lord seeks to destroy them, if He purposes to destroy them, then you can be certain that they will be destroyed. Jesus promised His disciples, Mark 13:13, you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And as we continue in this world, more and more and more, we will see that the entire world is against us. But that's nothing new for the people of God. Athanasius, one of the early church fathers in the first few centuries of church life, wrote a book called, in Latin, Contra Mundo, Against the World, because the entire world was against him. He was exiled from the Roman Empire on multiple occasions because he insisted on orthodoxy when the rest of the world wanted to synergize Christianity with paganism. God's truth abides and God's word conquers. The entire world is against you. Stand with Christ and know that you are on the winning side. You're on the stronger side. You're on the right side. Don't be afraid of the world. Fear its creator, its Lord. But the Lord doesn't just protect his people physically from their enemies. He changes the character of his people. He saves their souls. He regenerates their hearts. Verse 10, and I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and pleas for mercy, so that when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps over a firstborn. The house of David, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, are not in and of themselves any more deserving of the Lord's salvation. It's not that we were somehow better than other men, and therefore we deserve the blessing of God. But God has poured out a spirit of grace on us so that we can see what we have done. We can look on him whom we have pierced. Jesus quotes this concerning himself, but it's true not only of the men who were alive in Jerusalem at that time and had a hand in his crucifixion, but on all of us. Our sins have pierced him. He was pierced for our iniquities. He was crushed for our sins. Upon him was a chastisement that brought us peace, and by his wounds we are healed. Jesus Christ, very God of very God, is the suffering servant who was pierced on our behalf, pierced by our sins. It's the Spirit of God, the Spirit of grace, that allows us to see that and mourn over that. To see that it was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. We weep, we mourn over that sin as bitterly as we would mourn for an only child or a firstborn. It's great. Verse 11, as the mourning in Jerusalem was at or for Hadad Ramon, the plain of Megiddo. If it's for Hadad Ramon, we have no idea what it's talking about. Hadad Ramon is not mentioned anywhere else in Scripture. But we know that the plain of Megiddo is where Josiah, one of the greatest of Judah's kings, died fighting against the Pharaoh Necho. It was utterly devastating to Jerusalem and to Judah. The point, clearly, is that through the work of God, we mourn over our sin more than we've ever mourned over anything else in our lives. Sin is the greatest tragedy in the world. We mourn each family by itself. Family of David, family of the house of Nathan, David's son, house of Levi, the house of the Shimeites. Shimei was Levi's grandson. Everyone's mourning by themselves. It's so easy for us to look at the world and say, yes, the world is fallen, the world is sinful, the world is messed up. And if we spread the guilt around enough, it's easy to blunt the impact it has on us. That yes, I'm a fallen sinner among a world of fallen sinners, and most of them are worse than I am. And yeah, we're all really messed up. But the mourning here, the Spirit of grace here, it's not enough to just recognize and confess that, yes, humanity is fallen. Humanity is sinful. Humanity has rebelled against God. You need to realize that you have rebelled against God. You have pierced him. He died for you, because of you. It's not the spirit of condemnation that brings us to this point, though. It's the spirit of grace. It's the spirit of mercy that allows you to see this. It's a mercy of God that you recognize how sinful you are. Because it's that recognition that leads you to your Savior. It's that recognition that leads you to the fountain mentioned, beginning of verse 13. On that day, there shall be a fountain opened for the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and uncleanness. What fountain is this? It's not a pool in Jerusalem. It's not Bethsaida. It's not Bethesda. It's not Siloam. This fountain is filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. And sinners plunged beneath that flood lose all their guilty stains. And it's applied to you by the Holy Spirit who's been poured out over our hearts. What does Ezekiel 36 promise? The Lord will pour clean water on you, and He'll clean you from all your uncleanness. He'll purge you of all your idolatry. He'll put a new spirit within you, give you a new heart. It's careful to obey His rules. Men, we just went over Titus chapter 3, verses 3 and 4, but we also read verses 5 and 6. And what did it say? We talked about we ourselves were once foolish, disobedient, led astray. But now, the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation by the washing of regeneration and the renewal of the Holy Spirit. This fountain, it's the work of the cross. It's accomplished by the Son, applied by the Spirit, that cleanses everyone from all sin and all uncleanness. If you're in Christ, you are no longer who you once were. You've been cleaned, you've been sanctified, you've been justified by the work of God. We sang this morning, this ocean's depths I cannot know, but I can glory in its flood. This is the fountain of God. It's the forgiveness of sins. The greatest sin in human history, deicide, the murder of our Creator, has led to our salvation. So great is God's love for you. He's opened this fountain. He's plunged you beneath it. But not only does He cleanse you of your sin and your uncleanness, but He's purging the entire world of all sin and all unholiness, all idolatry. Zechariah 13:2. And on that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, so that they shall be remembered no more. And also I will remove from the land the prophets and the spirit of uncleanness. And if anyone again prophesies, his father or mother who bore him will say to him, you shall not live, for you speak lies in the name of the Lord. As we look around at the world today, again, evangelical, well, firstly, there's a whole lot of problems within evangelical Christianity, and a great deal of that is not saved. But even if every professing evangelical were truly redeemed, they're quite a minority in world religions. It seems like we're shrinking and shrinking, and there's more and more atheists and Catholics and Mormons and Muslims and Hindus. But all these idols will be cut off, and every lying prophet will be cut off. There will be no more lying prophets. There will be no more people who claim to speak for God while speaking their own imaginations, while speaking to make themselves rich. Will be cut off. They'll be ashamed of what they once prophesied. They will deny that they ever prophesied. There will be ultimately none of them left. In the new heaven and the new earth and the new Jerusalem, we won't have to be defenders of the faith. We won't have to rebuke those who contradict sound doctrine, for all that will be is the truth of God. Everyone will see it, everyone will know it, everyone will embrace it. But it's a violent process. Verses 7 and 9. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who stands next to me, declares the Lord of hosts. Commenters or commentators are divided over whether this shepherd is the false shepherds condemned in Zechariah 11 and 10, or if it's the good shepherd. Jesus uses it, applies it to himself. But whoever the shepherd is, the results are obvious. The shepherd's destroyed, and wrath comes against the little ones. And in the whole land, declares the Lord, 2/3 shall be cut off and perish, and 1/3 shall be left alive. A huge portion of the world is going to be destroyed, utterly cut off. And the third that's left alive doesn't have it easy. I will put this third into the fire and refine them as one refines silver, and test them as gold is tested. They'll come through the fire. They'll be refined. They'll be purified. They pass through the fiery trials that come upon them. They will call upon my name, and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is my God. They're refined. They're purified. There's no sin remaining in them. They're purely a people for God's own possession. But it's not easy. It's not painless. It's fire. It's a testing. It's refining. It's suffering. that we need to be ready to endure. Chapter 14 really repeats chapter 12. He circles back around the same idea. The nations have gathered against Jerusalem. Verse 2, I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city will be taken, houses plundered, women raped. Half the city should go out into exile, but the rest of the people should not be cut off from the city. Things will look grim and horrible. We shouldn't have this idea that we should not have this idea that as long as we're doing everything right, we're going to grow and prosper in this world. That's not the promise of God anywhere. Certainly not the promise here. I mean, things are grim for Jerusalem. Things are awful. You look at it from any outside perspective, half the city's already gone. The whole world's gathered against it. And any prudent military advisor would be, okay, it's time to send up the white flag. We're done. Let's give up. But it's at this time when things seem as bad as they could possibly be, as bad as it has ever been or ever will be. Verse 3, then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations, as when he fights on a day of battle. The Lord, again, Zechariah 12, it's the strength of the inhabitants of Jerusalem is the Spirit of the Lord, their God. The Lord will fight for us. We're not going to conquer ourselves. The Lord will conquer. His feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, and the weight of his glory will split the Mount of Olives in two. And our security is found in fleeing from this valley that the Lord has split. We could be very poetic. We could talk about the rock of ages cleft for me. But I think that's going beyond the text. The point here again is just that the Lord provides the victory. He provides the safety. He provides the salvation. He alters the very face of the earth so that we might escape to safety with him. Flee to the valley of his mountains, which reach to Azal. We have no idea where Azal is, but certainly it's this valley, these mountains stretch as far as they need to stretch to save God's people. Will flee as they fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Again, there's this earthquake. It was an unforeseen disaster. People fled in terror, fled for their lives. They fled with no real hope, no earthly hope. And by the grace of God, they survived. And by the grace of God, we survive the wrath of the nations. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. And what we can lose this in our English translations because we've gone through so many different languages to get to our point. But what does the New Testament, especially the epistles, constantly call the church? Paul and Timothy to the saints who are in Philippi. That word saint, it's English from Latin, from Greek. In Greek, it's hagios, it's holy ones. To the holy ones. We are the holy ones of God. We've been made holy by the grace of God, by the fountain of God, we will come with Him. From just utter hopelessness comes total victory. The Lord fights, and all the nations of the earth, there's nothing before Him. They're a drop in a bucket. The Lord comes and He establishes His kingdom over all the earth. On that day there shall be no light, cold, or frost. Revelation promises that in the city of God, the sun will no longer strike them with its heat. It shall no longer suffer cold or heat. There shall be a unique day which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night. But at evening time there shall be light. And what is the new Jerusalem? There's no sun in the new Jerusalem. There are no days. There are no nights. There's no turning of the world. The Lord Himself is its light. He is our light. He is our sun. On that day, living water shall flow from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea and half of them to the western sea, shall continue in summer as in winter. Again, this is what we see in Revelation. It's the New Jerusalem. It's a river of living water. Now, it doesn't just flow in one direction. It covers the entire world in summer as in winter. It's not dependent upon rainfall or snow melt. It's a fountain that comes from God, that brings life to His entire world. And the Lord will be king over all the earth. Verse 9, and on that day the Lord will be one, and His name one. Our God is already King of kings and Lord of lords, but so much of this world lies in rebellion against its rightful king, its rightful master, its rightful owner. But on that day, in Revelation, handles Messiah, the kingdoms of this world is become the kingdom of our God and of His Christ, and He shall reign forever and ever. On that day the Lord will be one, and His name one. There will be no competing systems of belief. There will be no other deities. There will be no other idols. There will be no other systems or worldviews. All the name of Jesus, every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory and praise of God. The land will be turned into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, from Judea's northern border to its southern extremes. It will all be turned into a plain. It will be flattened, but Jerusalem remains aloft on its site. Jerusalem is a city on a hill. It stands atop Mount Zion. It will tower over the entire world. If you look at Revelation, the dimensions of the new Jerusalem are impossibly large. It stands over everything. It towers over everything. It is the center piece of God's kingdom. It's where He dwells with His people. And it is glorious, because the King is there in His glory. And it shall be inhabited, for there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. Jerusalem shall dwell in security. Yeah, before we started, we were talking briefly about measures taken by our president for national security. I don't think anybody really feels safer because of the executive orders. I know some people, some situations feel quite a bit less safe. We can never achieve perfect security in this world, all we can do is forfeit our freedom for security and have neither. But in the Lord, in His kingdom, we shall dwell in security. There will be no threat from anyone or anything. There will be nothing to harm you. All the enemies of God are defeated forever. All those who hate you are gone forever. You are secure in the will of God. And then verses 12 to 19, we see the fate of all those who continue in their rebellion against God and the people of God. Their flesh will rot, their eyes will rot, their tongues will rot. A great panic from the Lord shall fall on them. They've gathered together against Jerusalem, but all that they've done in gathering together against it is bring all of their wealth to Jerusalem to be gathered in. Verse 14, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations shall be collected, gold, silver, and garments in great abundance. Everything that this world has, everything it boasts in, everything it thinks it has accomplished, gathered, collected for itself is rightfully God's, and He will claim it as His because it is His. And everyone who survives of all the nations shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the feasts. Keep the Feast of Booths. And then we see the punishment from those who, if any do not go up to worship, there should be no rain on them. And what we see here, first, is the grace of God, that even among those at the very end who are gathered against Jerusalem, some of them will be spared and saved and converted into worshipers of the King. This very last moment, there are still those who will be saved. We should rejoice in that because we ourselves were once enemies of God. And there are more enemies of God who become the people of God. Those who aren't converted, those who don't go up to worship the King, will live in a land without rain, without water, without relief from heat and fire. Think of the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And after the rich man dies, what does he beg for? He begs Abraham to send Lazarus, have him dip his hand into water. Just put a drop on my tongue. He's utterly without water, without rain, without relief from the fires of hell. As Jesus told us repeatedly, it's where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. That's the fate Revelation describes as a lake of fire. There's no water. It's only fire. There's burning. For those who refuse to worship the King. This is a punishment that they have rightly deserved for themselves. Verses 20 and 21 bring us back to Jerusalem. For the nations outside, for those who refuse to worship, there's fire forever and ever with no rain, with no relief. But for Jerusalem, for the people of God, on that day there should be inscribed on the bells of the horses, holy to the Lord. And the pots in the house of the Lord should be as the bowls before the altar. and every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holy to the Lord of hosts. Everything in Jerusalem will be holy to the Lord, will be set apart for service to the Lord. Every last thing, down to the bells on the horses. Not saying the horses will be holy, they will be too. Even the bells on the horses will be set apart for the service of the Lord. The pots in the city, every utensil, every tool, every garment of clothing, every person, every man, woman, and child, from the greatest riches to the smallest toys, shall be holy to the Lord. They shall be completely devoted to His glory and His service. And in that, it's not... We have such a defective view of the world. So often we think that, well, what's holy to the Lord isn't of any benefit to us. God's benefiting from it, and I guess that's a good thing. We just suffer without it. But verse 21, and every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holy to the Lord of hosts, so that all who sacrifice may come and take of them and boil the meat of the sacrifice in them. When you boil the meat of the sacrifice, the priests were able to eat the meat of the sacrifice. And in this Jerusalem, where everyone and everything is holy, everyone is able to come and sacrifice and take the meat and eat the meat and boil the meat of the sacrifices. There should no longer be a traitor in the house of the Lord of hosts on that day. You probably have a note that says that traitor is also Canaanite. It's the same word in Hebrew. The idea in either case is, they're outsiders who are present at the temple. These would be the people that Jesus drove out of the temple, the money changers, people making a profit out of others trying to worship the Lord. They'll be gone. Everyone there will be sincere worshipers of the Lord, and they will benefit from their worship. They will enjoy their worship. In being holy to the Lord, they're not they are sacrificing. They're not losing anything. They're not missing out on anything. There's nothing that they're passing up, nothing good that they're passing up to be holy to the Lord. And being holy to the Lord, they can fully and completely enjoy everything that God has created and given for them. It will be joy beyond anything we've ever seen or imagined in this world. It's a perfect place that, again, is better by far than this world and all that's in it. The song that we sang to begin this worship service this evening, if you go to the link that John provided, it tells you it's based off the letters of Samuel Rutherford, who was a Scottish minister during the Puritan era, during a time when Scottish Puritanism was oppressed rather fiercely by the monarchy. And his letters are absolutely marvelous. His sermons are marvelous because he was so deeply in love with Christ and so very aware of the excellencies of Christ and the beauty of Christ and the glory of Christ. And I commend them to you. It's in this in this Jerusalem where everything's holy to the Lord, at last we'll be able to gaze with unveiled faces on the bridegroom, the Lord of glory. And it will make every pain and every torment and every sorrow in this world just seem to melt away into insignificance. You'll have no regrets, have no remorse. You will delight in being holy to the Lord. So if there's any application from these chapters, it's quite simple. And that's, if you are counted among the people of God, make sure you stay there. Trust in the Lord. Treasure the Lord. Reject the lies, the threats, the persuasions of the world. If you're not an inhabitant of Jerusalem, if you're not a subject of the King, if you're not a part of the bride of Christ, then recognize what awaits you and what's available to you. And know that time remains for you to depart from the nations of the world and to join with the people of God. And join them while there's still time, and know that what awaits you is far better than all that you leave behind. Hold fast to Christ. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for your salvation. We don't deserve it. We haven't earned it. But you've freely given it to us because of your great love. And Lord, we know that you will keep us till the end. Lord, help us to be brave as the world rages against you and against us for your sake. Lord, help us to never return evil for evil, to rather overcome evil with good. Let us pray for those who persecute us. Let us preach the world as the weapon of our warfare. Let us preach the word as the weapon of our warfare. Lord, let us be bold and courageous for your sake. Let us be resolute. Let us wait patiently but eagerly for the day of the Lord, when you make all things right. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.